Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. I hope you're having a great day today. In this video, we're going to be doing a review for the Superman movie from 1978 starring Christopher Reeve. This is a pretty significant movie in both the superhero genre and just in film history as a whole. We'll get to some of that later, but just to hop right into the review, this is a very good origin story of Superman. It just has the classic plot of him being the last survivor of Krypton and landing on Earth as a baby, and obviously just finding out how to use his powers for good. From there, I also think Richard Donner just did a really good job at directing this movie. Normally in my reviews, I don't mention too much about the directors, but just the way that the film is shot and some of the transitions I think are pretty incredible. And this is very much the classic Superman that you've seen from the comics, which at this point, the character was introduced in the comics 40 years before this movie came out, and he was in some 1940s serials, as well as a series with George Reeves. So he had been in live action before, but just never with quite this budget. I guess the same could be said about all of Marvel and DC up to this point. Now, Lex Luthor was also the villain in this film. This is also the classic Lex Luthor, not really the huge businessman that he is today in the comic. So it's not really the version of the character that I prefer. That's pretty much how he was from when he came out to even at this point in time. The first introduction to his underground hideout is pretty cool, and I don't even mind his real estate plan. Some of his schemes in this movie just feel a little bit weird and more of like something out of the Batman television series from the 60s. I also feel like they didn't really know what to do with him for the first half of this movie, so you see him pop up a few times, but it's not really till over halfway through the movie that he becomes a huge character. I think the movie is aged pretty well just because of its quality filmmaking, and even most of the time when Superman's flying, it does look pretty real. Of course, the way they shot it looks more like he's slowly levitating at times than actually flying, but if you stop and think for a second, I feel like that's what it would look like in real life more as than the ones that they do today, of it just being so flashy and fast-paced. That's crazy how cinema has changed. Things that are faker look realer, just with the use of CGI and stuff. It's all just changed our perception. Anyways, as I was saying, most of the shots were very well done. They definitely put effort to make it look as real as possible, but there are a few in there. This was the very early days of the green screen where it didn't look too great, but they did their best to make it look as good as possible, take the time to do that. And they were pushing technology. I mean, this was just a year after Star Wars came out, which that was actually on a much lower budget than this film. This movie cost roughly $55 million to make, which was the most anyone had spent on any movie at the time. And if you adjust that for inflation, it would still be somewhere around like the 20th to 30th highest budget for any movie ever made. And I think the casting was also pretty good here. You had Gene Hackman as Lex Luthor, Marlon Brando as Jor-El, but Christopher Reeves as Superman himself was the one that really stood out to me the most. Up to this point, he actually hadn't been in any movies. He'd worked on Broadway, but not on the big screen. I really think he was the perfect option for the role. He even got pretty muscular in just a couple of months, so he didn't have to wear a muscle suit. Characterization of him is pretty good. It just does a really good job of making you understand, why you want to care for him. He just wants to do the right thing. And his disguise as Clark Kent actually is pretty believable, just the way he acts. My favorite part's definitely the scene where he just catches the bullet in his hand. Now, a lot of things in this movie, though, do feel like, by today's standards, like not exactly as what you would think of when you think of a blockbuster. That's really the question, if it really holds up by today's standards. I think it does. I think it's quality filmmaking. But there's definitely a lot of people that would argue otherwise. And the most important thing is probably just its cultural influence. If this hadn't been successful, there might have never been any more DC or Marvel movies as we know them today. That being said, I feel like it is a pretty well done movie. I understand if there's some stuff in there that you feel hasn't aged well, but it does a lot of things right. On the overall quality scale of 0 to 100, I'll give it an 88%. And I definitely recommend this if you're a fan of superhero or just comic book movies and you haven't seen it. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Now, a lot of things